And recording. It is 6 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. It is the 19th of June, 2018. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of ITSE 2309. I regret that we don't have more people joining us, but we will go on anyway. Um, let's see. We are now in Module 6. And we have covered the inner join. And we talked about the syntax of the inner join, the new syntax, and I'm highlighting one here. Select we're basically following a primary key, foreign key pair. And we talk about an inner join of the parent to the child on the primary key of the parent joining the foreign key of the child. And that is basically the way it always goes. One of the ways that we could see that is select, let's see, select what? Well, I guess we better say use. So we would say use AP. And let's see, I want to talk about vendors and invoices. So one vendor has 0 or more invoices, and an invoice has exactly one vendor. So select vendors, v dot vendor ID. Vendor ID and the invoice ID from vendors as V. It's always nice to rename them. So vendors as V, I don't have to. Otherwise, I would have to have said vendors.vendor ID as V, inner join. Let's see, I'm going to start with V dot I can have a where clause. If I'm interested in a where clause, I can have, where the state is equal to California or something like that. I'm just not going to go ahead. I'm not going to select one at this time. So if I were to execute this, I see all of the vendor ID, invoice ID pairs. I could have it looks like I'm ordering by the vendor ID by default. If I want to order by vendor ID, I need to say that. I think it'll let me get away without saying v.vendor ID. Now this one will be ordered by the vendor ID. I can count on that. So I have 2 invoices for 34, 37, one for 48, 72, whole bunch of them for vendor ID 95. Look at that, 121 just has a lot of them. And I can go on with that. Okay, so the point being that I only see vendor IDs and invoice IDs that participate in the relationship. So I could add in the vendor name and other stuff about it, vendor total, invoice total, and all that stuff. But for right now, basically I'm following the key. Now, the other way to do this is that way that okay, so as I if we do it this way, and this is the same thing, it's going to give us exactly the same output. If we execute this, we are guaranteed to get the same thing. So these are two exact same queries. This particular one, this one is called the new syntax, the explicit inner join, and this one is called an implicit inner join, where we just put the two tables in there and then the join condition goes in the where clause. This is the newer syntax. This is the one we are encouraged to use. Questions?
Well, if you use the newer syntax, then we will have to say the keyword inner join.
I'm sorry, yes, we have to use the keyword inner join, yes. Now, if I am not real happy with this, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it anyway. We can drop some of the syntax. If we do not use the keyword inner, it will still work and we will still get the same output, but I will not be happy with it, because if we say vendors as V join invoices as I, we will if we drop this keyword inner join, I will not be happy. I will take off points. So if you see I think the textbook does that in a couple of places. Other things that I can do, and you can do if you get out of my class, you can drop the keyword as, and it will still work. I teach the full syntax of the language, so if we run this one, it will still work. We will still get the same. So select v.vendor ID, I invoice ID from vendors v join invoices I. I will not be happy if you write it like this. So I want to see the full syntax as v. I want to see the full syntax of using the term inner join instead of join.
One quick question.
Yeah.
So when we have what you said, the newer syntax, is that the one that's called explicit?
Yes, this is called the explicit join.
Okay.
Where you say inner join invoices on, and there was really no particular reason to go from that to what we have now, except when we got to the outer join, and we'll talk about that right now. Okay, so if we have an inner join, we must have an outer join. Properties of the inner join are, I only see results where we have a vendor ID and an invoice ID that match. Remember, the conditions under which we get in there are the vendor.vendor ID has to match the invoice.vendor ID. Well, what about vendors that don't have an invoice? They don't show up. What about orphans? What about if we allowed an invoice that had no corresponding vendor ID? This would never be true for them. So this would not show us orphans, and it would not show us childless parents. It also would not show us invalid foreign keys, and we will encounter those from time to time. Okay. So we've come up with the outer join. Okay, we have two tables in here. We have vendors as V. And I'm gonna take out that inner join right now. Let's put a placeholder in there. Invoices as I. There is a table on the left. Vendors is on the left. Invoices is on the right, and I'm talking about we read from left to right across that way. So the vendors is the table on the left. Invoices is on the right. Now, when we are talking about an inner join, it doesn't matter. Put them any way you want. That's about to matter. I'm going to talk about a left outer join. From vendors as V, left outer join, invoices as I. There's also a right outer join. When we talk about the left outer join, I'm talking about this join faces to its left. So the table that is on its left, I will retrieve all of the rows from that table on its left. If I made it a right outer join, I would retrieve all of the tables from the right table, which would be invoices. Now, if you think about it, now it matters which one you put first and which one you put second. I can turn a left outer join into a right outer join if all I do is switch the order of the tables. For this reason, I only need really one of them, left or right, so by which way I put the tables, I can get it. Most systems give you a left and a right. Now, if I were to look at my output, I get from this particular query, let's execute, and notice that I'm getting all of the vendors, ordering by vendor ID. Notice that vendor ID 1 has no invoices, lots of null invoices. Lots of the vendor IDs have no invoices. Well, what about vendor ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on up to the first one I get is vendor ID 34. I guess I'm going to highlight it here. Vendor ID 34 has a couple. 35, 36 don't. 37 has some. In fact, I have more vendors with no invoices than I do that have invoices. So these are what we call childless parents. So for example, vendor ID 84 is a childless parent. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't hurt anything. And as we go down through them, I see I have probably more vendor IDs that do not have children than that do. Questions?
Well, can we add just to look at the other side, can we add another where clause where we can say invoice ID is null?
Of course, yeah, that's just what I'm about ready to do. I want to see only those vendor IDs who are childless, and I can put a where clause in there where I dot. And so if I put this in there, I'm only, now it doesn't make much sense to look at, to have I.vendor ID in there. I can put him in there, but all I'm going to see there is nulls because that's what I've got. But let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to see a whole bunch of nulls. And so I see that I have 89 rows, 89 vendor IDs that have no invoices.
Okay, then an inner join can be written such a way it becomes an outer join.
Can an inner join be written to become an outer join? Well, the inner join, It can be back in the old days when all we had was this syntax right here. This is the old syntax. When this was all that we had, we had a way that we could say from vendors, and we had we would put a plus from plus vendors, and that would say include everything from vendors, and then sometimes it would be on this side, and so that was inconsistent of how you said it. And so therefore we came up with the early 1990s. They came up with the newer syntax, and so we say left outer join, and we mean to include everything from the table on the left, and only those rows from only those records from the right that participate. So when we say left outer join, we mean everything from the left table. If I'd said right outer join, I would want to see the invoices. Okay.
Which would be the same as not null.
If I change this from is null to is not null,
that becomes a right outer join.
No, it doesn't become a right outer join. It shows me only those who have. So it essentially becomes an inner join where it's not null. I'm mostly interested in it where it is null, because if I say not null, this has essentially become an inner join.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay.
Yeah. Now, if I change it to a right outer join, where vendor ID is null, and so where not the vendor ID is null, let's take a look at this one before I put the where clause on it. If I take the right outer join, now what am I seeing here? I'm seeing the everything from the invoice table. So notice what I have here. I have one of them in there. I have invoice ID number 68 that has no vendor ID. Tell me about, I think that's the only one I have in here. I put that one in here. Okay, so here I have one of them in there. And what does that mean when a invoice ID has no associated vendor ID? Let's go take a look at it. That was 68. Invoice ID was 68. And let's go over to the invoices. And we'll say edit top 200. And let's scroll down to invoice ID number 68. And what do we have here for vendor ID?
999.
999. And if I were to go over to the vendors table and look for 999, there isn't one. This is invalid. This is an invalid record. I put him in there for that reason. Okay. He's not an orphan. Now, if I were looking for orphans, I could find orphans. All I have to do is look at the vendor ID field, and I'm looking for a null in there. I don't see any nulls, but this one is invalid. He is not supposed to be there. Well, yeah, he is. I put him there. But vendor invoice ID number 68 is an error. He is an invalid child, a child with an invalid parent. I cannot find that with a inner join. I can only find that with an outer join. So here is the critical wherever my, right, where okay, find invalid. Find invalid children.
The 999 by design, put in a 999 when there is no.
There is no vendor ID, so if I were to go over there and into my Object Explorer and I were to look into the vendors table, edit the top 200 rows, and I were to look for a vendor ID here of 999, I can look. The biggest one I've got is 123.
Okay. How did you created 999, right?
I didn't create it. I put that value into the table.
Okay.
The constraint should have stopped me, but I turned off the constraint and I inserted it into the table, and then I turned the constraint back on.
Okay.
So normally, under normal conditions, the constraint that says that it's a foreign key into the vendor's table should have stopped me, but I deliberately overrode that and put it in there, just so we would have some invalid data to find when we got to this part about outer join.
Okay.
And so we can find with outer join, I can find parents with no children. So let's go back to this one. Invalid children, and this is find. I'll send you a copy of this.
Okay.
Find okay, finding childless parents. Let's see. So these are childless parents. So all of these guys are null. They have no children. And I have 89 childless parents. So finding childless parents. So the parent is on the left and the child is on the right. Left outer join, pointing at the parent where the child is null. If I switch them around, I could switch it from, I usually put the parent on the left. The parent on the left, child on the right, and then I do a left outer join. I could go around, that's just my way of doing it. I put the parent on the left, the child on the right. Finding invalid children, I point the join at the child where the parent is null. So this particular one finds an invalid child. Let's see. And this one will also, to find an orphan child, I do not need an outer join. This is an important point. To find an orphan, I could do an outer join to find an orphan. But an orphan child, all I have to do is look at the child table. And I can find orphans simply by looking at the parent field of the child table. So the parent ID, in this case, if I looked at the invoices table, all I would have to do is look at the invoices table where the vendor ID is null. That would be an orphan.
Yes.
I don't have to do a join to find orphans. But invalid children, I have to do an outer join. Questions?
Okay.
Okay, like the inner join, I can drop off this term outer. And I can just say left join, and it will work until I grade it, and then it won't work anymore. So if you just say left join, it works up until I get it, and then it doesn't work. So when you say well, if you're going to do a left join, make sure you say left outer join. You never say join without either the word inner or outer preceding it.
Okay.
Even though the syntax that SQL Server and others, it's not just SQL Server, by and large, the syntax of SQL has evolved. Nonetheless, I am going to teach the full syntax. And if you choose to shorten it later, well, you just shorten it later. But in this class, I'm going to teach the full syntax. Okay. And gee whiz, that's the story on the outer join. Let me go to my, let's look at the examples of outer join. Left outer join, right outer join. If I switch it around, if I switch the tables, it switches from a left outer join to a right outer join. Next. This is how you find invalid, this is how you put one in there. If you say alter table, if you alter the invoices table essentially, and you say no check the constraint, you are now able to insert an invalid child. This is a bad idea. So I insert into invoices a value where there is no parent. And now I would be able to turn the check constraint on. We encounter this problem. Database programmers will encounter this problem. People will not enable the constraint. They will not check the foreign key. They will just put the data in there, and they'll get data in there in the child that has an invalid parent, or they'll delete the parent and end up with invalid children. It happens. And so when we look at it with a under this condition, invalid children, I point the join at the child. The join points to the child. My child is usually on the right. My parent is usually on the left. My child is usually on the right. That's just how I write them. You don't have to write yours that way. I'm okay with it if you don't. And then the on condition and where the parent is null. So if I execute this guy, I'm going to find all of my invalid children. In this case, I only have one, and invoice ID 68. And very frequently, what I might want to do, let's take a look at what the offending value is. He's going to end up being 999. And here, since I'm saying order by, now I have to say which one. It really doesn't matter. I don't even need to say that. I'm not going to have that many of them, I hope. So most of the time, if I have some, I'll have 3 or 4. And so invoice ID of 68 has no corresponding vendor ID in the vendors table. But in the invoices table, he has a 999. And that one is invalid. So if I went over and searched for that one in the vendors table, I would not find it.
Yeah.
And so that is the whole idea of this. We do execute the right outer join because I always put the child on the right. If you find it, so what do we do now? When you are searching for it, you're apparently searching for it for a reason. It's giving you trouble. What is the trouble that it gives you? You either can't enable the constraint, or it's giving you, there's a problem. You have three options. Basically, you can take the offending rows out of the child table and you can delete them. I usually put them into some other table. I usually don't just throw them away because they're there for a reason, so I don't want to throw them away. I'll usually put them into some table where they're not causing me any problem. Okay? If other constraints allow it, you can set the foreign key to null. So I could set that 999 instead of 999. It could be null. Here's what I usually do. I usually insert a record into the table that is into the parent table. Insert a parent record into the table that is designated to be the parent of orphans or anything else. So, parent of orphans. In this case, I don't know what I would make his vendor ID be. I could make him be a hash. I could make him be about anything. It really doesn't matter. So if I have a problem, I mean, he might be 0000. So instead of 999, I change the 999 to 0000. Now he is picked up as a parent with a valid record that has vendor ID 0000. And I still keep all of his data. I don't know about that vendor ID of 999. I've just, I don't know what to do with it. So instead of creating that, I create a record and I call it the parent of orphans. And that's typically the way I will handle those. So child issues. I'm getting ahead of myself with this one. Update. This is a subquery, and that's actually the next topic that's coming up. This query does not belong in this chapter. Power of SQL is its ability to process massive data sets. 10% of them have invalid foreign keys. SQL above could have corrected that issue in a matter of seconds. And then I put in my caveat, be careful. Database does not have an undo. So you always be careful.
Do you keep a copy just in case?
It would be nice. I wish I had that ability to keep a copy. But remember, a database is a huge structure, and I don't always have the luxury of keeping a copy. Now, do I make a copy out onto a tape someplace? Yes. I back my database up, of course, but most of the time I do not have the disk space to back my database up as a copy of the database, and I have to push it out onto tape. We have a saying in database, have you hugged your backup today? So that's you can go back, but it takes hours to undo. Another common use for the outer join is listing childless parents. I've already talked about that. There are some rows in the vendors table that have no invoices. Actually, there are 88 or 89 such rows. Um, there are some products some products there are that do not have a right outer join. And so you have to put the one you want on the left, your target for all of them, but modern ones today have a left and a right. Chapter 4 exercises. Hint, these are all outer joins. Okay, well, good grief. We 6:35 and we're moving right along through this. Questions?
Well, once we start coding a few of the queries, I mean, concept you taught is understandable. When you start coding some queries,
Well, I will certainly be available on I don't think I'm going to start. I'm going to start the next chapter, of course, on Thursday evening. We do have a test coming up. Pay particular attention to the practice test. I have put the my solutions to the practice test. Doesn't mean that there are no others that are valid. My solutions are out there, and yours may still be valid. Don't put a whole lot of stock into, if I say that I got 35 rows and you get 34 or 36, don't worry too much about it, because sometimes I change the data a little bit. Let's see, what is this?
like I sent you an email. You saw that.
I did see it. I haven't really had a chance to look over it carefully.
Okay, can I explain?
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay. That.
Hang on, just a second. Let me look at this. Is this is an outer. All of these, I think there are 5 of them here. They're all outer joins. Okay, Bowman, go ahead and ask me the question now.
Okay, on the 5 assignment, module 5B assignment that we have to turn in.
Okay, let me find that.
The 8th one.
Okay, let me get there. That was module here. Select from where.
Yeah.
And in the assignment.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was number 5.
Okay, number 5.
Okay. Let me look at it here. Write a select statement, return 3 columns. Invoice total, and then plus 10%, 10% of that, and then 1. And so it returns 3 columns. So the invoice total, 10% of the invoice total, and then the invoice total plus 10%. Okay.
But there is a where clause. I think you probably left that out because that's why you.
I don't have a where clause in there, do
Yes,
I?
you said where the balance due is greater than 1,000 somewhere.
Okay, where did I say that?
Here, balance due is greater than 1,000.
Only return rows where the balance due is greater than 1,000. Okay.
So you
Okay.
left that out, so that's why you got more records than I did.
And what did I say I got?
You said you got 144 or
Oh.
114. I only got 3.
Oh, okay. And where did I say that I got 144?
Your solution.
Okay. Oh, let's just write it quickly. So we want to see. I want to see balance due where the balance due is greater than 1,000. So let's find out. Select. We'll just say Let's see, invoice total.
Mhm. Minus
Minus
payment
payment total.
plus credit.
I think you're probably right. Credit. And so we're expecting to see
Yeah.
we're expecting to see 3 rows here. If we see 3 rows, you are correct. And yes, I got 3 rows. Okay. Yeah. And let's see. So that would be in. Let me get that corrected. Okay, it would be right here in the query output, wouldn't it? And here, yeah, I got 114 rows. Okay.
And number 8, you got 2, I got none, because you said you put in those 2 records in your database.
And the books had no invalid rows, therefore I definitely I coded them into the creation script this way. Okay, number 8 I do believe is
I didn't get any records.
all right, let's go take a look at that. Reddit selects the invoice number, payment due, just like above. To be valid, a payment date. Okay, yes, this one does have it. This one is tricky. Now, for this one, look at it. I'm asking you to return invalid records, but I'm telling you here what to be valid it must be. Okay, so to be valid, the payment date must be null if the balance due is greater than 0. So I would write the balance due. Yes, there are 2, and this one is a challenge. So if you think about it, you can read the valid records. So payment date is null and balance due is greater than 0. So if I were to say payment date is null and now balance due is this. Is that right? Payment date is null and invoice total, this is the balance due, is greater than 0.
Yeah.
We agree with that?
There's another where clause.
Okay, or this is another way. So and is going to get evaluated before or, so we're in good shape there. And this one says payment date is not null. And
balance due not equal to 0.
Is equal to 0. Now this one says greater than 0.
The other one should be not equal to 0.
So this one should be and equals 0, right?
So I thought one will be not equal to 0.
Well, let's go read it. The first one says greater than 0.
Next one is not equal to 0.
Must be if the greater than 0, and not null if balance due is equal to 0.
So what I did, I changed that null not equal to 0.
Not null if the balance is equal to 0. Now, is that what I've said here? Payment date is not null and the balance due is equal to 0.
This is the valid record.
This is a valid record, yes.
You want the invalid record, so it should be
bingo. Okay, how do I make this? How do I get that?
I changed the second one.
Well, you can apply some logic to it, but the easiest thing to do is put it in parentheses and go right in front of it and put a not.
All right.
And if you will do that, you will get your 2 records. Read it carefully. Write it because you're writing it just like it is. So payment date is null and balance due is greater than 0. Or payment date is not null and balance due is equal to 0, and we want that not to be true.
The thing is, since it is the or, if the first one is true, it won't look for the second one.
That is correct. The first one, if the payment date is null, let's see, the payment date is null, and then it will look at the second one, invoice total. The balance due is greater than 0. If that is true, it will not look at the second piece of the or. So if the payment date is null, it will not look at the and, but it will drop to the second part of the or.
Yes.
So there's 4 conditions there. I have payment date. Let's call this one A. Payment date. This is A, and B. If A is true, it will look at B. If B is true, it will not look at C and D. If payment date is, if A is false, it will not look at B. It will drop straight down to C.
Right.
Look at that. If C is false, the statement is false. If C is true, then it will look at D. So by the short circuit Boolean evaluation, the main thing to remember here is that ands are going to get evaluated first. So the ands will be put together first, and then the or will come after them. Whether it short circuits or not isn't really a problem in this one, because we don't have anything that's causing a runtime error here. And so we say that Java and C and others. By the way, I don't believe that this language short circuits. I don't believe that this language looks at this one, and if this one is false, it does not look at this one. I'm not sure it does that. I would have to research it. I'm going to teach this class in the advanced next semester, so I'll need to know that. But right now, it has never become important.
So what you are saying that the 2 records that you have added, it's in my database also.
Yes, yes. Let's see, that's from invoices.
If we go back to the...
I think that this should bring us up with the 2 records right now. And there's my 2 records. So invoice ID 1 and invoice ID 2. are invalid records by these criteria.
Okay. Is there any way I can look into my code? Go back to my.
If you write it, if you go to that to this, go to this guy, and you write it just like this, and you write payment date null and balance due greater than 0, or payment date not null and balance due 0, and you put a not in front of that, you'll get those two records.
Okay.
It's an invoice ID 1 and 2. They're there. You were correct on the other one, though. I will. I'll put that into my errata and get it changed.
Okay. Now, if you read this one here, challenge, when it says to be valid, is this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here. Any invalid payment. Okay. To be valid, it is null and balance is greater than 0.
Okay.
Okay. So to be invalid, it will be not null.
Yes. What you're trying to do is called applying De Morgan's principle to it, and you're free to look that up. In other words, you're trying to factor the not through the logic. And yes, that can be done. The simplest way to do this, though, is to write it as a where it's valid, and then simply put it in parentheses and put a not in front of it. Let the computer pull the not through the logic.
Okay. Okay.
That's the simplest way I can tell you to write it. And what happens is you think of the not as a negative. And so it's like pulling a -1 times a negative sign through a parentheses in mathematics.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, no, I understand that part.
In logic, it works a little bit different. Every expression you come to, every or changes to an and every relational operator, greater than, less than, changes to its opposite. So if you have greater than, it changes to less than or equal to. If you have equal to, it changes to not equal to. So it gets a little trickier when you're applying De Morgan's theorem. It is not really my objective to teach De Morgan's theorem. That's more for a upper division logic class. I don't mind doing it, but the easiest way, you can Google that if you want to.
No. I think I understand what you're saying.
The easiest thing to do is just write it as such that it's returning all the valid rows, and then put it in parentheses and put a not in front of it.
Okay. Okay.
And you should get 2. Yeah, there's 2 there.
Okay. Okay. Then.
And you were correct on the other one. Did somebody join us, or I guess that was your computer chirping. Okay, questions?
No, that's about it. This is a short. I understand.
Yeah, well, we're about at 7 o'clock now, and so that's usually what I expect to spend online. Of course, I'll spend longer if I need to.
Now, up to this point, it's going to be on the test, right?
Yes, this will be the end of test 1. And we will have one more class period on Thursday where I will review. And by then, I should have that output corrected. The one you pointed out that was wrong. I'll get that corrected. But number 8 is correct. Number 8 has 2 rows.
Okay. I can see where I have gone wrong.
No, well, that's great. Okay. I'm willing to meet at other times. What I'm going to do is turn, just for your information, everyone, I'm going to turn on test 1 on Friday, I believe Friday evening. and it will be open all weekend. And on Monday and then Tuesday, it will close. Okay, you may take it at any point during that time. When you sign on, when you access the test, you will have 2.5 hours. I gave 2 last semester, but people were complaining that it was too much. You should be able to do it in 2 hours, but 2.5 hours gives you time to take a bathroom break in the middle easily. That is subject to my discretion. If it's 2 hours and 32 minutes, I'm fine with it. It's not going to clock you out. Okay, so if you're over 2.5 hours, you can still turn the test in. If it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, I might take off a point or two. It's we're not going to worry much about it. So you're better off to go ahead and finish the test, even if you run over time. Do not run past the due date or the due time. I am not happy about that. When it says it's due at whatever time on Tuesday, I haven't said it yet. Make sure you turn it in by that time.
Okay, and it's going to be along the line with the practice test.
Yeah, indeed, sir. Practice test does not have a huge point value. I'm letting you grade that yourself. So you give yourself the grade, and I'll just tell you, okay, you got all 5 points. I'm fine with that. I'm just trying to put some value on it to get people to do it. If I didn't put if I didn't put 5 points on it, nobody would do it.
Okay.
So it's just kind of like 5 points of extra credit. It's really meaningless. Well, no, it's not. It's 5 points. So do it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time worrying about grading it. So I won't know whether you copied it from the solutions I provided or not. But I'll know when I grade your test.
Yeah, but since you have given the solution to the practice test. I didn't see.
I have enabled those. Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, you go look at them.
Okay.
And test it. See if yours are roughly similar. There's ways you can be correct and not be exactly like those. So, grading the tests, I spend a lot more time on the tests than I do on the other stuff. I should have the all of the grading caught up by Thursday. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I have to end the meeting to start processing the recording. I should have the recording posted by in about 20 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, and good night to all. All a good night. I am now ending the meeting. Ending.